Welcome back to Laddie's Garage for episode 13 of the Turbo Tonner build. It has been a fair while, so before we get stuck into obviously putting it on E85, let's do a little bit of an update on how the big girl's going. Now, I do love that car. It's quite a fun car to drive, and it's been going good. Had a few issues. She's just chilling, ready to come into the shed, but obviously I've had to get new tyres since you've seen it last. For some unknown reason, it does go through rear tyres pretty quickly. Also, I managed to get it mod plated, so it is legal. So she's all mod plated up. Just had to be mod plated for turbo because this car, it was V6, but because this car does come in a V8 variant, all that sort of, the motor and the gearbox did not have to be mod plated in Queensland. So yeah, I've done the normal oil changes and stuff like that. But one thing that has gone wrong in it since I've had it was my Tilton master cylinder that was second hand from the United States. It did give up on me. Now I do have the old one in here, and I'll sort of show you what happened. Now one day I was just driving it, and then the clutch pedal did not come all the way back, just all of a sudden. So inside here there's like a piston, which in the rebuild kit looks like this thing. It actually jammed in there. So I don't know if it's worn or it's just too warm, but the piston ended up getting jammed, so the whole thing was not moving, so I lost clutch. So straight away I thought, okay, I can rebuild that, so I bought the Tilton rebuild kit from Summit in the United States, and they sent it over, and this is the rebuild kit. And then while I was waiting for that to come in the mail, I pulled this out and realised there's no rebuilding it, so I ended up just getting a whole new one. Now I think it was $60 US, which even when you convert it and then express ship it is cheaper than a standard one to suit that car in Australia. So I changed that out, and it's been going really well. So now it's been some time, but the weather's cooling down, and there's some roll racing events and power cruise events coming up, and I think I want to have a bit of fun in it. So I thought, yeah, it's time for a little bit more boost in the E85. So at the moment the tonner is on pump fuel, 98 RON, whatever it is, octane, premium unleaded out of the pump, and I run about 7 psi boost, I think 14 degrees of timing, and it's tuned to about 10.5 to 1 air fuel ratio, so it's very safe. It's probably the reason why the standard bottom end Ls1 has survived. Like, I'll give it a pretty decent hard time, and it's been holding up well, and I feel like it's time to step it up. So you have to wonder why do we go E85? A few reasons we should talk about. I think the number one reason would be maybe evaporative cooling. You know what I mean? When that E85 gets sprayed in compared to the fuel, and it mixes, when the fuel injector sprays it in and mixes with the intake air, the E85 will evaporate a little bit with the air and will actually cool the air. So that is always good. Cooler air is always good. Another major reason would be E85 actually has a higher oxygen content in the fuel. So just in spraying the fuel in itself, you're actually spraying more oxygen into the engine, and we all know what that means: more oxygen, more power. So that's obviously a massive advantage. And also just lower cylinder temps. Like when the explosion does happen, the actual explosion is an actual cooler explosion, so you're going to get lower exhaust temperatures. Your pistons aren't going to be burning up as hot, so generally a lot better for making more power and more boost. Now obviously there is disadvantages, and one of the probably major ones is you're probably going to use 25 to 30% more fuel, so you have to pump 25 to 30% more petrol more E85 into it. So more fuel means obviously you're going to need more fuel pump or more fuel system, more fuel injector. Now I have 80cc Siemens injectors in there, and I have a Walbro 460 E85 fuel pump, which should be enough for me to go to 12 pounds of boost, maybe 550, 600 horsepower to the wheels, and it should be able to supply it alright. The only thing that worries me is my pump's still running on standard wiring, which is quite thin, quite small gauge from the factory. So today we are going to pull the tray off, pull the pump out, and do a bit of wiring modification, run a relay heavier wire to get that pump singing, give it heaps of current so I know that I'm not going to run out of fuel before I go tipping E85 in there. Another disadvantage to E85 is there's less service stations that have it, especially here in Queensland, but I have found on my route, if I ever need to take my ute to work, there is sufficient service stations for me to run the car on E85. And in worst case scenario, if I don't want to run it anymore because it becomes a pain in the arse, I have the HP tuner software. I can just change it back, no problem at all. So I do have that flexibility, but for other people out there, that is something that you would have to take into account. Can you get the E85 easily? And I suppose another disadvantage is it's corrosive, slightly corrosive to fuel systems and rubbers and stuff like that. I haven't really had too many people have many problems. I've had people with 044 fuel pumps gunking up from running them and then letting the E85 sit and not using them. But I think if you use your car enough, your fuel pump should be fine. My Walbro 460 is designed for E85, so hopefully it's got internals that can handle the corrosion. I have all aluminium hard lines, the factory aluminium hard lines up the car for fuel lines. All the rubber, when I changed the rubber over for running the fuel lines in the new fuel reg, I used the E85 compatible rubber hose. I don't really know how important that is, but I think most rubber hoses these days are going to be made for E85 because there's so many people using it. So after speaking of that, we're going to do it. We're going to put it up to about 12 psi, going to tune it, upgrade the wiring. So enough talk, let's drag this ute in here, and I'm going to get that tray off so we can expose the fuel pump and get amongst work today. Okay, let's get rid of this tray. The fuel tank's in under here, got to pull the hat out, so got to move the fuel filler out of there, and I think there's two bolts, so there's like 8 bolts I've got to undo, bit of wiring for the tail lights, and then I can lift that tray out of the way. Nothing too exciting, so I'll get that tray out of the way. Okay guys, everything's unbolted. No one around, so you just got to make do with what you got. So I've got the straps hooked up, get this tray off, the engine crane. Okay, the tray's off. Moved the tonner right in. Had some shocking weather lately, heaps of rain, so try and get in here. Just got the tray chilling out the way there, so I could still get to what I need to. But now we can access the fuel tank. And this is originally a V6 1 tonner, so on the fuel hut you'll see I have a feed and return. Genuine V8 one will only have a feed, it has like a factory deadhead system. So I'll take you through the fuel system. It's a Walbro 460 in there, which we'll take out soon. You can still see I'm only running the standard wiring to it. use the standard 5/16 lines, which could be an issue. We might run out of flow there, but we're going to give it a red hot go. So you got a feed and return that go the whole way down underneath the car. Then feed and return, and of course fuel tank evaporation as well as the third one. Then those lines run across the back, feed into the regulator, which I've just got a ProFlow little -6 regulator. Pretty simple. The feed goes into the side and then the return comes out the bottom. Now at the other side I've got the feed line, which I have made 3/8 already. Comes around, that's insulated and goes into the fuel rail. And you can also see the Siemens DK80 injectors in there. So 5/16 might be a limiting factor, but I'm just going to give it the best chance it can by upgrading the fuel pump wiring. Now you can see that the wire gauge there is not massive. It's not terrible, but you know, it comes through a factory loom and probably does a million loops and turns and everything like that. So we're going to get some more direct power straight from the battery using a relay. Now, to get the bigger wires, I just ended up buying a quick fuel universal fuel pump relay kit, which comes with, you know, a loom with all the wiring that you need, instructions, an inline fuse, obviously a relay, instructions on how to do it. Very basic. You can easily buy all this stuff separately and do it yourself, but just generally probably a little bit easier. One thing that does fail with this is if you've got a battery at the front and your fuel pump's at the back, the wiring, the heavy gauge wiring that goes to the battery is not long enough. So I will put a joint in it, so I've got some additional wire that matches the gauge to make the wiring longer. So the other thing I also have is these bulkhead terminals with like an O-ring seal. Now the point of these will be to get the heavier wires down into the fuel pump. I'm actually going to drill holes in the top of the hat and hook the heavier wires, because this plug reduces the size and the current of the wires that goes down through the plug. So we want to bypass where the fuel pump gets power through the hat and run bulkhead terminals down inside there to really feed that pump. Now they do suggest in instructions that we put the relay as close to the fuel pump as possible, so I'm going to be mounting the relay up on the inside here, inside of the chassis rail. Should be nice and dry up in there, or dry enough. Might even put it up right up in the corner here somewhere. So that should be nice and close enough, and we're going to have to run wires from the battery positive terminal. I'm going to put them through the factory, try and get them through under the factory loom so you can't see it. Then through the car, through the bottom of the kick panel, through the door sill, up through the factory spot. Try and do it as good as possible, but we'll go through that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get that fuel pump out, and we'll work on getting the terminals and the hat and sorting the fuel pump out. Okay, I've got the fuel lines off. They're those quick connect ones. I don't know, what my previous videos I show you can use a bottle lid, cut it down to slide it in there, or you can just get a little screwdriver or a couple of little screwdrivers and pry them off. Nice and gentle, it's all plastic, so don't get amongst it too much because they will break. Now I've got to get this ring off to bring out the fuel hat. And it's just a matter of getting one of these slots with an old screwdriver and a hammer and just giving it a tap around. Like so. Take the ring off. And you can see that hat's spring loaded in the bottom of the tank, so the bottom of this actually sits on the bottom of the tank. And there you have the hat. Here it is out on the bench. If you look at one of the previous episodes on the tonner build, you'll see where I fully modify this to get a 450 in there. Everything seems to be holding up well, not too bad. So we really want to put these bulkhead terminals through the hat, and they come with little O-rings to go around the bolts, and these little nylon and O-ring plugs. Now we want to put them through the top of this hat, so we get new bigger terminals to run the wiring down into this fuel pump, to really match the gauge of the wiring that's coming off this fuel pump here, which is pretty heavy, a lot heavier than the factory stuff that comes out of that factory plug. So first thing I notice is there's this webbing in the bottom of this hat, and we have to get two nice flat surfaces for these to plug into. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is get my Dremel grinder out and just Dremel grind out a couple of them braces. I don't think it's going to worry the integrity of it. Let's go nice and easy and just grind out those two braces, so I've got two nice little flat spots to put my terminals. You can see where I've already taken one of the ribs out with the grinder, so I'm going to try and get a bit of action shot for you of me grinding it out. Very simple. You can see there's going to be enough room there. Might have to take a little bit more out for that plastic bung and O-ring to help seal it sit in there. Now it's only plastic. I just use my carbide bit. It's for steel. Might block it up a little bit, but you just hold that on a wire wheel and all the plastic's gone. Never had a problem. So it's just a matter of slowly getting in there and just slowly grinding it down until it's flat like this one, and then just give it a bit of a skim. Now I'll give you a bit of a demo. I'll cut the sound out because this sounds obviously hideous, and just so you can see, like, there's nothing special going on here. You can see I've now got two nice clear flat spots. The ribs are gone. Just got that Dremel grinder in there like I was showing you. Now we can use the nylon spacer, or whatever you want to call it, where the two terminals are going to be. Sit them in there where you want them. And then we can mark exactly where we're going to have to drill our holes. So you can see we've got the two spots where we're going to put our terminals through. Now by the look of these things, they're designed for this flange to sit into the hat, but we might do that a little bit different. So I'll just drill the holes to start with tight for the bolt size, because I don't want any fuel getting up there. So I feel like tight with this bolt size, so that you would nearly have to thread this into the plastic hat so it's nice and tight. And then we'll put a little bit of goop, or a little bit of silicone I should say, between the nylon things, and we'll work towards making it perfectly tight. Got a little pilot drill first, just to get our mark, and then I'll have a drill bit the same size as the through bolt to come in afterwards. I'm just going to use the smaller one to come in through the bottom first, because the drill will be on a slight angle. You can see we've come through the top there. Now we can change over to exactly the right size, and I can hold the drill nice and square and straight. Now the bolt size is actually the right size that will actually turn in there. And we'll push it and turn it in there so it will be so tight. No point drilling those holes too big, because you make a nice tight fit between this bolt and the plastic, that's going to help seal as well. Then you're going to have the nylon with the O-rings on there, squeezed on there, and I'm going to put some E85 gasket maker on there too, some petrol resistant, fuel resistant gasket maker from Permatex. So just trying to do as much as I can, because I do not want this thing to leak. One thing I really don't like is being able to smell fuel on a car with work done to it. To me it just rings bells of dodgy workmanship. So going to do what I can to make that tight. So next step will be to look at the wiring in around that fuel pump and get some terminals ready to put this together. You can see that it doesn't take much effort, and it's actually making its own thread in that plastic, which is just, it's all about getting exactly the right drill bit size. Now the best way to tell what the best drill bit size is just to line it up. Line your drill bit up and make sure it lines up with the inside of your threads. So when you side it up, put the drill bit over it, this drill bit size is the same size as the inside shaft of them threads, and then you'll get a nice tight fit. Now I'm prepping the little nylon plugs, little nylon washers that have the O-ring and like a receiver groove on it. Now you can see if I was to bolt that hard to the inside of that hat, top and bottom, obviously that O-ring is not going to have any clamping force, because this surface here will be bottoming out on the hat and the O-ring will just be floating. So what I need to do is reduce that receiver step or groove or whatever you want to call it, reduce it right down to a point where it will just hold the O-ring, but it will also won't bottom out before the O-ring seals. So you can see I've already done one here. I don't know if you can see it, but it only has 1/2 mil lip on there now, so that when the O-ring sits on the little groove and then you bolt it together, that O-ring is just going to squeeze and seal really nicely. So the way I did that is I just put the little nylon thing in a little bench vise, and I just used my angle grinder of all things. You could use a sander if you wanted to, and just buzz across. Take your time and just cut a little bit off, and then just use the grinder as like a sander just to bring it down to the right height. Nice little 1/2 mil to 1 mil lip, and that O-ring just sits on there just nice, and it will compress nicely. So obviously I'll do that to all 4 of them, because in the top as well I don't want it to bottom out, and we'll get ready to start assembling. Now you can see I have done one. I've got a little bit of that heavier gauge wire prepped and on in one of the holes as a test run. Best thing for actually crimping these wires is proper crimpers. They're so worth the money. I recommend it. You just guaranteed a nice tight crimp, color coded so you can't go wrong. So it's pretty basic stuff. Take the head off the wire with your strippers. Yellow on the end of the tool there, yellow fitting. And they're ratcheting, so it'll hold the tightness until you can get 2 hands on it and get it all the way in. So easy. Now the orientation on the hat is I put the bolt through the terminal, then a little O-ring Then the nylon bushing or spacer, and you can see the O-ring seals in the little cup there beautifully. And then there'll be another O-ring, and then that gets wound up through the bottom into the bottom of the hat, like so. So you've got, I reckon that's awesome. You've got a couple of barriers there, and then on the outside, when we get to that, it'll be another washer, O-ring, another nylon spacer, a little bit of goop in there as well, a little bit of silicone. So I'll get that in and then we'll work on the top. Okay, I've got one side done there. You can see the O-ring just starting to swell out, and you can see the seal that I put on there. Little O-ring in there as well. It's actually, I'm really happy with it. So the orientation is, after then you put the O-ring, the nylon washer, the other little O-ring, then I put the stainless washer and the nut. And before I tighten it all down, just pull it all back, and I'll just put a little bit of that Permatex fuel resistant gasket maker in there. To get it in there, I'll just put some on the end of the screwdriver and just warp it in there. Put a bit around the joint. It's a bit messy, we can wipe it up. I just want it nice and sealed up. So yeah, now I'll do that up and we'll be ready for the next step. Inside that fuel hat is done. Crimp connected the wires for the fuel pump up to the new heavy duty wires. It's all sealed up, tightened up. Now what I did do is where the standard plug would normally plug in, I took note on which side was the black wire, which is the earth, and marked the side that would be the black wire on top. So negative off that pin there, so I know when I do wiring later, and also the way I wired it new, negative is this side. Just so I can keep everything the same. So yeah, that hat is ready to go back in, but before we go put that back in, we'll have to get rid of all that fuel out of there. So I'll get the siphon set up and we'll get rid of all that fuel, empty it right down as far as I can so we can top her up for E85. You just can't beat a jiggle hose for siphoning. I don't know what else you'd call it, but I've always called it a jiggle hose. You jiggle it to get the ball bearing working and get it siphoning. There's probably 10 mil of unleaded, 15 mil of unleaded in the bottom there, maybe a couple of litres. I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to take advantage of this being open to now put the E85 in. Okay, we've got 2/3 of the tank now of E85, which should dilute that tiny bit of unleaded quite nicely to start with. By the time I get the drivability tune sorted, we're probably going to have to top it up again, so that will reduce the unleaded content before we start making full pulls on high boosts. So we'll have a really good concentrate of E85 in there by then. E85's in, so now I can drop that fuel hat back in. Cheers. See, it's spring loaded off the bottom. So we'll line it up. Put the ring on there. and she's back in. You can see our new terminals there ready to go. We will have to take a wire out of here because we're going to use the factory power wire that powers the pump as the remote switch, so to speak, for the relay that we're going to install. Okay, I just click those hoses back on with those quick connects. It's no big deal. Now we're ready to start doing some wiring for the pump. Now this quick fuel kit comes with perfect instructions. You cannot go wrong, which is what I like about the kit. And you can see that we're going to need to run a wire, the red wire, from the battery through the fuse holder to the red wire that goes into this relay. So this is the relay post that they send you, so that big fat red wire needs to be run down the length of the car so I can mount the relay out the back near the fuel pump, and then I have to run it down the length of the car, join it into the fuse holder. They do crimp connects. I might just use their crimpers. I do have solder, but we'll see. And hook it to the battery. So I like to try and use the factory location for running the wires. And you can see down here, pretty bad light. It goes through the back firewall there. I'll get a light. You can see it goes through the back firewall there. So the first thing I've done is I've actually got a bit of the tie wire there, just a little bit of tie wire. I don't know if you can see that, this bit here. But I've actually poked that through the grommet, or down the side of the grommet where the factory wiring is, and that's the other side of it there, through that little access panel. So that's a good start. I can tape the red wire to that bit of wire now and pull that through that factory grommet in through there. And then I'm going to undo all this side here so I can run it up through the kick panel, which is where the factory one goes. And I'm going to pop out through that grommet there where you can see where the little arrow is. Someone's put a little tiny slot there already. This used to have a subwoofer in it, a fully 6 subwoofer, and that's where the power wire used to go, and I got rid of that. So I'll just stick it out through there. I'll tape it up, run it down underneath here, and I'll have my fuse holder and stuff for power here. Now the other part of the wiring is the yellow wire, which is 12 volt positive, which is a switch that you need to go into the relay to switch it on. Now we're not going to come from the battery there. This yellow wire here that comes into the post, we're actually going to tap in. We're going to tap into the existing positive wire of the fuel pump, which is this purple one here. So the factory wiring that would normally turn the fuel pump on, purge it when you go to start it, everything like that, that will actually trigger the new relay, so that everything will work like standard. And another part of the wiring is the negative side of this will go to ground. Nice big fat black cable I've got over there. I'll just put a ground on the chassis, which I'll use this big black one I've got here. And then in the relay you've got the grey needs to be grounded to the same ground. And that's as simple as it is. And then that fuel pump will have good power. So I'm not going to bore you with me crawling around this car pulling wires through. So I'll do a bit and I'll show you my progress. Okay, I've finished the wiring back here. I'm going to take you in for a bit of a look. Ended up mounting the relay just there. You can see the red wire wraps down around and follows the standard loom up towards the front. I've got the grey wire comes up into an earth there, and you can have a close look. You can see that I've ground the paint back with the grinder for the earth. So the grey one earthed out the relay. Yellow and purple continue through. Obviously purple is the main positive for my new post into the fuel pump, and the yellow is where it grabs the standard signal, the standard 12 volts, and heads back to the relay to tell the relay to turn on. And then of course we've got the black as the earth. It travels back to the chassis as well. It's pretty standard stuff. I ended up soldering and heat shrinking that joint there. Wasn't real keen on the crimp connector. Okay, that power wire comes around the chassis there and up through next to the standard wiring loom through the standard grommet. Virtually impossible to get the camera in there to see, but it goes between the wiring loom and the grommet, not between the grommet and the frame. The last thing you want is this power wire rubbing on steel. So that's run through the same hole as the factory loom, and then in the engine bay I've actually wrapped that red wire in black tape so you can't see it. So this is actually it here. Goes all the way around. Oh, focus. There you go. And you can see it just poking through the top of that grommet there in that old slot. It comes around in behind the fuse box and it pokes out here where the fuse holder is. Now I've got a splice joint that I'm just about ready to solder. Just a tip, when you start getting into the thicker gauge wires, that's the best way, like interlocking soldering, not trying to twist them together. And then I'll give you an update once that's soldered and I'll tuck it all away. Okay, I've finished putting the wiring in there for that fuel pump. Okay, you're probably thinking I can't see it. Well, that's perfect. That's the way I like it. So what I end up doing, you know I came out at the top there already. Around here you can see the wire I wrapped. It goes under this box. Then I teed it into this factory power box for the fuse box that comes from this terminal here. You can see the fuel pump wire is actually piggybacked over the top. Then I increased the size of the loom cover. So I went from the smaller stuff to the bigger stuff so it would fit the wire in there. Put it in there, re-taped it up, and the fuse holder just hangs out the back there. Just sort of tucked away. I'm not a real big fan of seeing random coloured wires that don't look factory flying across the engine bay. Just looks too, I don't know, dodgy. And also I ran the wire, followed the factory wire down the side here. So I did take all the panels off. Wait for that to focus. Yeah, it comes down the kick panel there. Just zip ties to the factory wire that goes down the side, all the way down. And even tucked it underneath the carpet in that back corner there, so that once these panels go back in, you won't even be able to see it. Now there's a few panels had to come off to get into that wiring. There was a couple off the side of the seat, they just unclip. Then there's a Phillips in the back of here. This is where the seat belt goes. A couple of them Torx bits along there, I think four of them. That just pops out of the top. And then there was one little Phillips bit up behind where you pull for the bonnet, and there's one down through the bottom there too. You get all them out. It's a bit extra effort to pull all that out, but at least, you know, the wiring is definitely tucked up away where it should be. I think it's worth the extra effort just to put it where it should be. So now all that wiring's done. I'll throw all this plastic back in. All the wiring here is done. So next thing is to throw the fuse in and see if that pump pumps and makes fuel pressure. Okay guys, I've put the 30 amp fuse in, I've put the relay in, it's going to hit the key and see if that pump's pumping. And it's successful. It's definitely got some fuel pressure. Just making sure there's no leaks around there. It looks nice and dry. Now I do have to do some work to the tune. Obviously, we'll go into that. I'm just interested to see if it starts, how it runs. Theoretically, it's probably going to be lean. It's going to be struggling to idle, would be my guess. There might be a bit of unleaded still in there, so we'll see. It is the next morning. Tray's all buttoned up, wiring in the taillight's done. I'm just about ready to put the tuning rig in. Got my laptop charged up, ready to go for today. Got a lot of rain yesterday afternoon, and tuning in the rain is impossible for boosted cars. Just spin the tyres, get no data. So the road is still wet, but looks like we're going to get some. The weather is clearing, so I'm hoping that road will dry. So I need to put that rig in. I need to put an oxygen sensor into the exhaust so that the computer and the wideband can read the air-fuel ratio. Now there's a bung in the exhaust that this oxygen sensor plugs into to read the air-fuel ratio as the engine burns and comes out. Now I'm on E85 now, and I have a AEM wideband, and you can see that the scale of the gauge actually reads from 10.0 it bottoms out at, and it goes around to 17. Now the premium air fuel ratio for gas is 14.7, right up through the middle, whereas it does change for E85. It's actually 9.8, which would be right at the bottom. So you would think that the scale would not work for tuning E85, but you can make it work. Now, it's probably going to be a little bit confusing, but I'll do my best to explain it. That gauge, when it reads air fuel ratio, it's actually a mathematical equation. The original information is actually lambda. Now, the premium air fuel ratio is actually lambda 1. Now that gauge just converts it over to 14.7. Now the premium air fuel ratio for E85 is lambda 1 as well. It's the same when it's measured in lambda. Now if it's converted to air fuel ratio, the premium air fuel ratio for E85 is actually 9.8. A lot richer. In other words, like when talking air fuel ratio. Now, because the original information is lambda and it converts over through mathematical equation, the original information is the same. So even though the ultimate air fuel ratio would be 9.8 in real life, because this gauge is set up original information lambda, we'll actually still go off normal air fuel ratio. So 14.7 will be premium. I'll change over to HP Tuner's screen capture, and I'll be able to explain a few things in the tables in there as well. Okay, we have the laptop open, and we will open up the editor. Normally you would read the vehicle. I've already read it. I've renamed the last one, the last tonner tune before E85. The only thing that we have to do to run E85 in the editor, in your tune, is go into airflow, and go into your primary VE table. This is pretty much a fueling table. If you watch my tuning videos, you'd already have a bit of an idea if you understand what this table does, but this is your main fueling table. So we all know, it's a known fact, that E85 you're going to need approximately 25 to 30% more fuel. So it's just a matter of highlighting the whole table, going up into here and putting 25% in and go plus. You've just added 25% fuel to the whole table. You should be able to now save the tune and then write that to the computer, and the car will start and run. Okay, finally, after waiting all day, the rain has gone away enough to have some dry roads, and I've been logging away, driving around the countryside doing logs. First of all, I can tell you that 24% increase in fuel was definitely the best, the closest. All through the middle, most of the top was nearly bang on to the target air fuel ratio. down low, rich, so I've had to take some out of the bottom. Now another interesting thing is it's making more boost. I didn't touch the boost controller and we've increased about 12 kPa, 12 to 15 kPa, which is a pound and a half, I think nearly 2 pounds of boost. And I haven't even touched the wastegate pressure or anything, so maybe the efficiency of the E85 is just making everything more happy, it's making more boost. One thing I have noticed is even on just under 10 pounds of boost, which I think is about 170 kPa is what I'm peaking, wheel spin. The E85 seems to be lighting that turbo off a lot quicker, which is nice. So everything with the E85 is definitely living up to its name. We'll have to say I'm chewing through it pretty quick. You know, down nearly a tank of fuel in no time. So what I'm trying to do now is pick up a mate to do some filming, see if we can get me mate Chris to hold the camera. We can do some pulls, so you can see what it's like. Alright guys, we're cruising out on the highway. My buddy Chris picked him up, making a few pulls. He's gonna film for me so we can get some action. So I'll hand you over to him and we'll do some third gear pulls from probably 80 kilometers an hour, and we'll stop at 100 or 110 is the speed limit here, so we don't want to go over the speed limit. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's only on 10 pound about now, and we might look at pulling over and turning the boost up shortly. Yeah, all that. Righto guys, pulled up on the highway, playing with the boost controller, trying to get a bit more out of it, a couple of pound. You can see down in here I've got one of them cheap eBay boost tees, so the signal's going to the bottom of the gate, so restricting the signal strength. So I screwed it in probably half a turn, 3/4 of a turn. We'll give it a couple of minutes to cool down and we'll go and see how much boost we can make. Alright, we've played with the boost controller, we've managed to get it to 185 kPa, which I think is like 11 and a half, 12 pounds boost. So I'll hand you over to Chris and we'll make a pull. Definitely feel the difference. Okay guys, just got back. Pretty happy with how the tonner's going. Getting about 185 kPa, which I think is about 11 or 12 pounds of boost. Thereabouts. It's pulling pretty good. Completely useless on anything under 80 k's. And even on the highway, you know, 80 k's, we did give it a couple of hits and it's starting to haze them off a bit. So in future videos we'll probably have to look at bigger tyres, maybe some electronic boost control. Definitely something to look forward to, that's for sure. Get it ready for some sort of a roll racing event maybe. Yeah, so that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit the bell if you want to be told when there's more. And yeah, leave a comment. Any questions, any experiences you've had with V85, any bad experiences, whatever. Share it around. So yeah, they're all packed up and we'll see you on the next one.